Today we have with us Raymond Benson. Raymond was the first American to be authorized by Ian Fleming Publications to write James Bond continuation novels, of which he has written 6. Plus, he wrote 3 novelizations of the last 3 Pierce Brosnan James Bond movies. And today, he's got some exciting news to share with us.
Hi, this is Tom.
And Dan with SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. A big welcome back to our show, Raymond.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Happy to have you here.
Absolutely. We know you have some exciting things happening for all of us James Bond fans. But just give us a little quick history of how you became involved with the Ian Fleming Publications folks and the Ian Fleming estate.
Well, that's not a quick, short answer. I was a theater major. After I got out of college, I moved to New York City, and I was working in theater, directing plays and composing music for theatrical productions, doing that for a few years. You know, I became a Bond fan back when I was 9 years old in the 60s, the early 60s. And my father had taken me to see Goldfinger on the big screen. I saw it first release, and then 6 months later, the double bill of Dr. No and From Russia with Love came out. So within about 7 months, I saw the first 3 movies on the big screen at a very impressionable age.
Nice.
Wow.
And I started reading Ian Fleming books at that same age, 9, 10, 11. I was reading Ian Fleming.
Wow.
So I was, really into James Bond as a kid and in the 60s, but in the 70s, I went to college. I kind of grew up and that decade wasn't my favorite Bond decade for movies anyway. But then in the 80s, I was living in New York City and For Your Eyes Only came out, which to me was kind of a hark back to the more realistic Bond movies of the 60s, and I kind of got excited again. And then the first John Gardner book came out the same year, and I read that, and I'm going, wow. And suddenly I started reading the Fleming books again. Yeah. And I got all excited, and that same year, this was 1981, some friends of mine and I were sitting around, and the question came up, if you had to write a book, what would you write? And when it was my turn, I said, well, I'd like to write a coffee table book about the entire history of James Bond, with a biography of Fleming and analyses and critiques of all the books and all the movies, because there wasn't anything like that at the time.
Right.
There was, we'd had a couple of biographies of Fleming. They were out of print. We'd had a couple of books about the novels, like Kingsley Amos's The James Bond Dossier. It was out of print. We've had a couple of fairly recent books of just about the movies, the John Brosnan book and Stephen J. Rubin's book.
Yes.
But I wanted all this in one big tome, and I wanted it on my shelf. And the only way that was going to happen is if I wrote it. So I investigated how to do that. I met a publisher that a friend of mine had a book published with. I met an editor there, and she said, well, you need to write a proposal, that says exactly what you're going to do with the table of contents and all this stuff and a sample chapter and blah, 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 blah. And I said, oh, okay. So I took the time and I did that. And I gave the proposal to this publisher and I got a contract to write it overnight.
Wow.
And of course, then it took 3 years to do.
It was a labor of love, right?
It was a labor of love. It included going to England and meeting members of Ian Fleming's family and the people at what is now called Ian Fleming Publications. Back then it was called Glidrose Publications.
Yes, right.
And the man who ran it was Peter Jansen Smith, who was the chairman, and also he was Ian Fleming's literary agent back in the day. Wow. And so he was basically the boss of the literary side of the business. And I also met, Fleming family members and colleagues. I met Ivor Bryce and I met Ernest Cuneo over here, talked to them and became friends. And eventually the James Bond Bedside Companion came out in 1984. And then it was published in England in 1988, an updated version.
That was the first book of yours I bought.
Yeah. Yeah. I would imagine.
I loved it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So that, kind of established me in the sort of the fan world of Bond, and then I was involved with the American Fan Club, the Bondage magazine, and was, appearing at some of the conventions that were happening in the 80s and stuff like that. And then in 1995, 11 years later, around just before, the beginning of November. It was like 2 or 3 weeks before GoldenEye came out, the movie.
Yeah.
And I got a call out of the blue from Peter Jansen Smith. And he said, Raymond, John Gardner has decided to hang up his hat. He doesn't want to do Bond anymore. And we thought of you. We wanted to know if you'd like to give it a shot.
Wow.
What?
So you're just sitting there, you just pick up the phone and this voice on the other end.
Yes,
Wow.
yes.
That's wild.
So, and mind you, I'd never published a novel. I had written fiction.
This is amazing.
Actually, he had read my very first attempt at a novel, which was written in the late 1980s. And, it's one of it's the proverbial first novel you shove in a drawer and never take out again. But I think he saw in it that I could begin a novel and, more importantly, finish it.
Mm-hmm.
He also knew that I knew James Bond inside and out. I knew all the books, I knew all the movies, I knew the world. And in the second half of the 80s and the first half of the 90s, I was working in the computer gaming industry as a writer, designer of adventure games, role-playing games, very complex plotted storylines that I would create, as well as the dialogue for all the little characters you talk to and things like that. So I was writing fiction and doing, award-winning games. So I had that background as well. I kind of had to audition in a way. We didn't call it that, but I had to come up with an outline of a story, and it had to be approved by Glidrose Publications, as well as the British publisher, Hodder and Stoughton, and the American publisher, which was Putnam. And
a lot of fingers in that, puzzle.
Yeah. And Peter and I talked about what direction should I go in? Should I just follow John Gardner in contemporary times? Should we go back in time to the 1960s or the 50s even? And then GoldenEye came out. And it was, as you know, a big reboot, major hit.
Yes.
And so Peter said, maybe let's keep it in sync with the movies. And in fact, why don't you make your M a woman? He also said, we would also like you to make your books a little more cinematic. Make them kind of have the tone and feel of the movies, but be very faithful to the spirit of Ian Fleming. And I said, well, that's great, but I want my Bond to have all of his vices. I want him to smoke and drink and womanize and all that. And they said, that's fine.
Okay.
Try to not make him anachronistic, but, if you can make it work, do it. We talked about, setting it in Hong Kong, which was, the handover was the following year. I knew the book would be published in 1997. So that was the year of the handover. I said, what if we set it in Hong Kong? He said, that's a great idea. So I did a lot of research and I wrote the outline, and it was approved. And then they said, okay, now write the first 4 chapters on spec. And so I did that. And by March 1996, everything was approved, and it was finally announced that I would be the next writer. Then I went to Hong Kong and China and Macau and did the nitty-gritty research and wrote the book over the summer of 1996. It got edited in the fall of 1997, and it, as you know, 96, and then it was published in the spring of 1997. And after we saw that it was going to be, a success, then they signed me on to a few more books. So I worked for them for 7 years and did the 6 originals. And part of my job was to do the novelizations of the movies. John Gardner had done GoldenEye.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one up was Tomorrow Never Dies, and I was in the hot seat then. So that's the first novelization I did.
Now, is doing a novelization harder than creating your story yourself?
No. The original books took a year because you're coming up with your own plot. You're doing all the research. You're doing, all the heavy lifting. For doing the novelization, they give you the screenplay, so you know the story. They give you and the dialogue and all that. You just kind of have to flesh it out. If you put into prose everything that's in a screenplay, you'd be about 30,000 words too short. of a novel.
Mhm.
So you have to embellish some stuff. So I was
Yeah.
able to at least ask, hey, can I add a scene of my own invention? Like, for instance, in Tomorrow Never Dies, there's a chapter about Wei Lin, the Michelle Yeoh character,
Hmm.
uh, about her getting the assignment to go to Hamburg.
Yeah.
Okay.
I give her a backstory that
That's
Yeah.
nice.
they kind
Yeah.
of hinted at in the movie.
Yeah.
And I did that with all three, some backgrounds of all those three books.
So definitely easier doing the novelizations.
Well,
Yeah.
also it was a shorter timeline. I had 8 weeks to do the novelization.
Oh,
No kidding.
jeez.
8 weeks. That's right. Because the publisher had to have the completed book 6 months before publication. So the movie was still being shot when I was turning in the manuscript. And that's why there are some differences in my novelizations with the finished film,
Yeah.
because they
Yes.
would sometimes rewrite things on the spot. And in fact, I was getting faxes every day of new script pages.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
So, yeah, it was very stressful because I had not, the original book I was doing, let's say, for example, I was writing The Facts of Death when Tomorrow Never Dies happened. So I had to kind of push Facts of Death to the side,
Yeah.
Right.
suddenly work on Tomorrow Never Dies for 8 weeks, and then go back to the Facts of Death. So I had
Yeah,
to do
yeah.
that each time the novelization came in.
Were they trying to coordinate the release of the novelization with the movie or right around the same
Yeah,
time?
they came out
Yeah.
simultaneously.
Okay,
Yeah.
simultaneously. So that's why you had 8 weeks. Boom.
Yeah, exactly.
No
And
pressure.
then there were the short stories I had to kind of fit in too. There were 3 short stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
1999 was a very busy year.
Yeah.
I was writing, let's see, it was the year High Time to Kill was published. I
Hmm.
was writing Double Shot. I had to write The World Is Not Enough. And I also wrote Live at 5,
Wow.
a
Wow.
short story. So,
Wow.
Thank God you're talented.
no, just mad.
I assume you're a very quick typist.
Actually, in high school, I took typing, and they
They made you.
the fast typists, they enter into a state typing contest, and this was the state of Texas, mind you. And
Wow.
I won the contest. I won state,
Wow.
Wow.
1972.
Well,
Yeah. I would
Good
not
thi-
be
good
winning
thing you
that
had
with
that
2
s-
fingers.
yeah. Good thing you had that skill set then.
Yeah.
To try to get
So the
all that done.
bedside companion kind of got you in the door, didn't it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
that did it for
that's
sure.
amazing. And that was an idea you were talking about with your friends. That's what I would write.
Yeah,
But
no,
the
it
good thing
was.
is you went and did it.
Yeah, you did. That's the difference, I think, with
Yeah.
most people. They talk about stuff and don't do it. You did
Yeah.
it. That's fantastic. All right. So now let's get into your latest project, Raymond. It's
Okay.
something exciting and cool. Tell us
Well,
about your. Yeah.
right after Bond, I was doing my own stuff and
Yes.
writing my
Yes.
own original novels, thrillers and mysteries, and
I love your
occasional
Black
tie-in.
Stiletto. I love that
Yeah,
Black
yeah.
Stiletto
Yeah,
series.
Yeah,
That's
you
great.
had a
the Black
great
Stiletto,
series
the
of
five,
books.
the Black Stiletto's
Yeah.
probably my favorite thing I've ever written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was also doing some tie-in stuff. I did a couple of Tom Clancy Splinter Cell books. I did a
Mhm.
couple of Metal Gear Solid books and things like that. And then lately, Ian Fleming Publications has kind of been branching out. I mean, they've been doing other Bond novels, but they've started doing some spin-offs. So, they did the Young Bond books, back in the mid 2000s and into the 2010s with 2 authors, Charlie Hickson and Steve Cole. And then more recently, Kim Sherwood has written, she's doing a trilogy, I believe, of the Double O agents. These are the not Bond, but the other
Yes.
Double O agents. And there's 2 books out already, and I guess a third book is coming out either this year or next year. I can't remember. And then there's also going to be a Q book by Vasim Khan, who that's coming out this fall. And he's going to be writing a series of books featuring Q as the main character. So I thought, well, maybe they're ready for a Felix. I don't know, because I've always loved Felix Leiter.
Mhm.
Yes.
even when I read back in the 60s, when I
Yes.
read the books, here's Felix Leiter. He's a Texan.
Mhm.
Yes.
Fleming designated him as a Texan. And I kind of identified with this guy, even though in the second book he loses an arm and half of his leg to a shark.
Mhm.
And from his appearances from then on, he has a prosthesis.
Mhm.
Fleming calls it a hook. But they in the movies they never portrayed him faithfully to the books. I mean,
Right.
I don't want to criticize any of the actors who played Felix Leiter in the movies, but we have never seen a faithful incarnation of Felix Leiter in the movies.
Okay.
For one thing, I mean, for me, the closest one was Rick Van Nutter.
Mhm.
Okay.
He was the closest to Fleming's, although he did not have a hook. He
Right.
did not have a prosthesis.
Right.
But
Right.
also, Felix in the books is this wacky guy. He's kind of a goofball. He's funny.
Mhm.
He's light. He's so jovial all the time.
Yeah.
He's like, come on, we're gonna drink. We're gonna go
Right,
drink
yeah.
ourselves silly. We're gonna go up to Harlem and hit the clubs. And
Yeah.
oh, you gotta order this, and you gotta eat that, and you gotta
Yeah.
drink this. Oh, try this, James. And he's like this. He mansplains America to him.
Right.
He's like this
Yeah.
Joker. I mean, in Diamonds Are Forever, when he first comes up to Bond, he comes up behind Bond on the street and sticks his hook in his back and says, "All right, buddy, stick him up," or whatever he says. He says, "No tricks, or you're going to be eating lead," or something like that. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is, and he's never that in the movies.
Nope.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted this sort of I wanted to do Fleming's Bond, and I wanted to do a novel with Felix Leiter. Have him have his own story in America.
Okay.
That's
He
great.
started off in the
I'm
CIA.
looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
He started off in the CIA, and then after the shark thing,
Right.
the CIA basically wants to put him at a desk job, and he doesn't want to do that. So he leaves and he joins Pinkerton's as a detective.
Yes.
And Diamonds Are Forever and Goldfinger, he's working for Pinkerton's.
Right.
By the time Thunderball, he's on the reserves of the CIA.
Yeah. Yeah.
He comes back because it's that serious of a case.
Mhm.
But so my conception, and I pitched it to Simon Ward, who's now the publication director
Okay.
at Ian Fleming Publications. I said, what about a Felix Leiter book? He says, well, write a proposal. that old thing, write a proposal. So I wrote a proposal and gave it to him, and they were very intrigued. And they said, yeah, this is kind of what we're looking for. But because I think they wanted to try some kind of a serial, an online serial for some project.
Okay.
And this kind of fit the bill. I conceived it as definitely in Fleming's timeline. In fact, I positioned the story in between Live and Let Die and Diamonds Are Forever in the early 50s.
Yeah, I like that you did that.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
terrific.
Going back to the
It's
basics.
the book is going to start off with him getting out of rehabilitation
Okay.
and joining Pinkerton's. That's the very first couple of chapters.
Uh-huh.
And then it's the rest of the book is his first big Pinkerton's case.
Yeah. Well, the serialization of stories was a big. I mean, Arthur Conan Doyle did that. Fleming did it to a degree as well. So that's exciting that it's going to come out like that. And the first one you wrote is called
The Hook in the Eye.
The Hook in the Eye.
The Hook in the Eye. So May 27th is the drop of the first episode. You have to buy it. If you're in America, you have to, have a reading device like a Kindle or a Nook or something like that. Mm-hmm. And you get it off of Amazon or Barnes & Noble and all that. And then every 2 weeks, your settings have to be set so that it can update files. And then they drop the next episode into the same file so that your file updates.
Okay.
And that's how it works. And so all through the summer, it's going to be 10 episodes every 2 weeks. And then at the end, in October, there will be a print publication of the book. That will be, and it's being exclusively published by Ian Fleming Publications.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, we love that you're setting it in the Fleming timeline, too, because that's going to be such a cool period of time to see what Felix Leiter does and how he how he acts, how he interacts with Bond. Like you were saying, Raymond, it's so different than the movies from what Fleming wrote, and you're going to pick up on that, right?
Right, absolutely. And I'm going to
Yeah.
be very realistic with his prosthesis. I had to do a lot of research on what a guy, I said it in 1952, and some people are kind of going, wait a minute, Live and Let Die was published in 1954 and Diamonds was 56. But you see, Fleming set his stories earlier than the years they were published.
Right.
Yes.
You may be familiar with a book that John Griswold wrote several years ago before his death called Ian Fleming, Chronologies and Annotations of the Ian Fleming Novels.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
he pinpoints exactly when in the real world these stories might have possibly taken place.
Yeah, okay.
And if you go on the James Bond wiki pages, they kind of adapt that same timeline. And basically, he says that Casino Royale took place in 1950 or 51, something like that. Live and Let Die was early 1952.
Okay.
Yep.
So the shark attack was at the very end of January 1952.
Yes.
So Felix is, and then he doesn't appear again until the summer of 1953 in Diamonds Are Forever. That's when that's supposed to take place. The fall of late summer, fall of 53. My story then starts in the spring of 52, and most of the bulk of the story is in the fall of 52.
Now that's a major decision to set it in that time frame. How did you make that decision? What was your thought process on that?
Well, I wanted to set it in between those two Fleming books.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to figure out, okay, what year was that really?
Okay.
Because, I like to put in real world events and things in my books. I did that with my Bond books, like I had The Handover of Hong Kong and stuff like that. I consulted John Griswold's book and saw that time period would have been 1952 or early 53. And I went, okay, what was going on in the world then? And I can't really tell you, but there are some real world events that that play into the story. So I thought, this is perfect. This is perfect. And so I set my story around this stuff. And that's how that came about. That part of it was kind of easy, but I just had to then do the research of the time period,
Right.
And it takes place all in America. It starts in New York City. That's where Felix is living. The first third is in New York City, but then we go on a road trip across America.
Nice.
There you go. All right, so you decided, okay, you're going to put it in between Live and Let Die and Diamonds Are Forever, and so that mandated your time date, your time frame, right?
That's right.
So how did you decide you wanted to put it in between those two novels?
Because I wanted to explore Felix after the rehabilitation, after losing his arm. That's an important part of his life. So I just think that would have been the, a great story for Felix. How is he going to deal with not being a CIA agent anymore and joining Pinkerton's to become basically a private detective?
Yeah, right.
Now I've got a question on when you're writing this thing, you're trying to figure out, okay, we're going to go across the U.S. and we're talking about a period piece. So what kind of research did you have to do of, I'm going to go to Chicago or I'm going to go to Miami, wherever this thing goes, because you haven't seen it yet. How much research did you have to do on that?
I had to dig for maps and guidebooks and anything that would talk about, this was before interstate highways. Right.
Yeah.
So, what roads would you take to get from A to B?
Yeah.
And what kind of stops would there be? What motels or hotels existed in 1952 where he would stop? What restaurants would he stop at?
Yeah.
And
he didn't have Google Maps.
What was on the menu?
Yeah, right. That's
and that took a lot of time finding this stuff. I had to write to a lot of people. I had to, go on eBay and buy maps and things like that from the period.
Does Route 66 make an appearance?
It does not. It does not. We don't go that direction.
Okay. All right.
But we do end up in Texas. And
I was going to ask
so
if you ended up in Texas at all. Yeah, okay.
oh yeah, because Felix is
You
very
did.
he is. I do play on his background.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
it is a mystery. It is a romance.
All right, we
It
got
is
some
a
romance.
it is a spy story.
Yes.
It's a road trip tale, and it's a postcard of a lost Americana.
That's
Nice.
awesome.
So that's a big audience right there, right?
Yep.
Any one of those categories would have a huge readership.
Well, I
And
hope so.
hopefully they all find it, and we're going to
Yeah.
help. All right. So from the beginning to the end, how long did it take you to write this, Raymond? It would take me maybe 30 years, and it would be bad.
Well, I pitched it in May of 2024.
Okay. Wow.
I
Okay.
finished the book in September of 2024. It
Wow.
went through an
Wow.
editing process in October, November. Went through the approval process with the Fleming family and stuff in December, January. And now we're getting it all typeset and cover drawn. Oh, there's going to be a cool cover.
Nice.
Um,
Yes,
and
yes.
all that stuff's being done. So,
Yeah.
Is the next one already in the process? Is there going to be
I
another
mean,
one?
another book.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, we haven't talked about that.
Keep it a
Yeah.
series.
I
Keep
think
it
we're
going.
gonna. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. Yeah, this might be a one-off. Who knows? Could be a series. Who knows?
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
not even going there yet.
Okay.
So
We got to see how this one does.
with all of the edits and your presentations to them, to the Ian Fleming Publications folks, did they have a lot of suggestions, or did they require you to change anything, or did they kind of give you the freedom to kind of write what you want?
I had the freedom to write what I wanted, just as I did back when I did Bond.
Hmm.
Yeah,
They've been very good with editing. You know,
yeah.
Simon is a fantastic editor and publication
Wow.
director. And he was very helpful in helping me sort of streamline, doing edits. I mean, there's stuff on the cutting room floor,
Oh yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
There always is,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
and you know,
Yeah, as
all I
an
can say
author,
is that he was right.
yeah,
He would
yeah.
suggest, maybe you should cut that, or maybe you should
Okay.
shorten this, or maybe you should, shape
Wow.
this way, or something like that. But he never changed the story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
Nobody, neither did Peter Jansen Smith when I was doing Bonds. They would never say, we don't like the story. All my outlines were accepted. They
Wow.
never
Yeah,
said,
yeah, yeah.
well, try again.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
when they're suggesting that you cut stuff as the author, is it hard to do? Is it hard to do that?
Well, it always is first, until you
Yeah.
realize, oh, maybe that's right. Maybe that's the way to go. I mean, you look at even movies, movie directors
Yes.
when they, they're told by the studio, well, you got to cut 15 minutes, you know,
Yeah.
and they kind of go,
That's,
or, or when you've got a 4 hour movie and you've got to make it 2 hours,
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
you got to cut a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
So you've got to understand that not everything is necessary.
And
You
you
know,
have to have the willingness to do it.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, there's something to be said for pacing
Hmm.
and moving the story
Sure.
at a pace and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Well, that's something
So
you do very well.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
well,
Reading
thank
your
you.
stuff,
Yeah.
it
So let's
just
say you
keeps
got to
going.
cut a page or two, and you're saying, how long does it take you to decide how to do that? Because that would be, to me, that would be like, oh my God, what am I going to cut here? This sentence, that sentence, this word, that word, this paragraph.
I don't know how to answer that. I just kind of
Okay.
study it and do it. I mean, I think my theater training helps with that.
Ah,
In fact,
yeah, okay.
I say that if you're a drama major, you can do anything because you learn how to,
Yeah.
work with other people, because it's a collaborative,
Yes.
um,
Right.
thing. You learn all about storytelling. You learn all
Yeah.
about structure of a story and characters. You learn all about dialogue and how to present it. You learn all about visual storytelling, set design,
Sure.
lighting, um, composition, visual composition and things like that. But then, I focused on directing when I was a drama major. So you learn all kinds of stuff about tempo and
Yeah.
um,
Tying
uh,
everything together.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
you really have to study a script, beat by beat,
Mm-hmm.
and learn the subtext. You know what
Mhm.
subtext is, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so everything has subtext, and I think all that helps in writing novels or whatever you do.
Yeah. So when the Ian Fleming publication said, "Okay, that's it. We're done. You're done. We love it. That's it." Could they still make changes, or are you done? Is it finished? It's boom. You, when they say it's done, is it done?
Pretty much. I mean, it goes through the editing process. Then it goes to a copy editor, a professional copy editor, and they may have some,
Okay.
things
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
say. So, but once that's done, then it's done. Yeah.
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 Sure. And
Then,
the cover and all
then,
that, are they producing the cover? Now, there's the
yeah,
cover. We've seen the cover on your website and so on, right? That's available to see.
there's no cover
Or is
yet.
that it?
You have
That's not
not,
it.
I have not, it's not been released yet. The
Okay. All
cover you
right.
saw was just a holding cover. It's just sort
Okay.
of
All right.
like
I actually kind of liked it.
it was just, sort of like a manuscript page.
Yeah. 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 But I thought it was
No,
kind of
it'll be
cool.
an illustrative
Okay.
cover.
All
Yeah.
right. And do the Ian Fleming folks they do that too, or they
Yeah,
have
yeah,
people that do that?
they hire the artist and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, cool. And do you get
and it's
to
gonna
approve
it's gonna
that,
be
or
good. I know. I've seen the preliminary and I like it.
do you
It's
have
gonna be
input on
nice.
that, or do they just
Oh
say
yeah,
this is?
yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
That's,
The artist would give us like 8 possibilities or sample,
oh,
rough sketches of ideas,
yeah,
and we would
yeah,
go, oh, I like that one number one, or
yeah,
this one number two, that one number three, and we'd all talk about it, and
yeah, yeah.
because
Well,
they have some say too. We kind of like to all agree on everything,
yeah,
So
and they kind of know what sells to and what grabs
yeah,
colors and
yeah,
everything else that grabs people's
yeah.
attention. I know remember when we talked to Joe Karoff, who designed the 007 logo and all that, and he did the movie posters for a million movies. Everybody knows about West Side Story, Last Tango in
Manhattan.
Paris, a million
Manhattan.
of them,
Yeah.
Manhattan. And he said he got to the point where he would not present a whole bunch of different ones. He would present the one, and then he'd tell people, he said Woody Allen was the toughest one. He told people like, I already thought about all the other ones, and that's why I have this one. So it's like okay, but they give you 8 to look at, which is kind of cool. All right,
Yeah.
all right. So
Manhattan was a great poster.
Yes, it
yes,
was. It
and
really
you know what
was.
he said about that? He said, "Well, it was pretty easy." He said all the letters I made tall because the buildings are tall, and so it was a very simple concept. He said, "Yeah, when you're brilliant, it's a very
Yeah.
simple
It,
concept."
it kind of created itself. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, good. Yeah, he was fun to talk to. He was 102 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was pretty wild.
Yeah.
So looking into your crystal ball or martini glass, if you will, what do you see in the future with in the James Bond world from your writing perspective and things that are going to happen on the Bond world? Does James Bond get involved in this little story you're talking about now, the hook in the eye,
Bond
or
is
you
not
can't say?
Bond is not in it. He
Okay.
is mentioned.
Okay. Always
Felix
mention
might
eyes.
mention him,
So we're going to see the
but
words. We will
well,
see.
he refers to him as his limey pal.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think, yeah.
We know
That
who
seems
he's
right.
talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. 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 Absolutely. All right.
Right.
So,
Now, I've got a question going forward. Since Eon Productions no longer has control of the creative screen content, do you think there's a chance that, because Amazon's going to be looking for content, that they go back and pick up some of your novels or say, oh, we're going to do these offshoots to some of these other characters? Have you had any talks with them?
I have not had any talks with him. No, I don't.
Okay.
I think it's too early to even
yeah.
Okay.
think
Yeah.
of all that stuff. I mean, they just hired the producers what a month ago or something
Yeah.
like that.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
Um,
for that one, but I'm just, you think about Amazon, it's like, okay, are they going to flood the market with Bond stuff?
who knows?
And if they,
Yeah.
I
We
don't
don't
want to
know.
speculate what they're going to do.
okay, all right,
I
Yeah. We
don't
don't know.
know. It's possible.
Uh,
I have to keep an open mind and hope that maybe they will do my books or something, or any of the continuation author books, really.
Yep.
Yeah,
I mean,
really. I
they've
mean,
been
Ian
ignored.
Productions kind of never went down that route because they had,
Yeah.
you have to pay more money and whatever else, and they had the Fleming books and whatever, writing their own stuff. But you never know what Amazon will do, so it's a
Yeah,
possibility.
we'll never
It's a
know.
possibility. Right?
Well, it'd be nice to
I'm
have some
keeping
good
an open-
writers behind some of these movies going forward.
Yeah. Well, I'm keeping an open mind. Let's just,
Good.
you know, you go online, you see all the Bond fan
Yes.
sites and the social media, and there's people complaining. There's people that are optimistic. There's people that didn't like the
Right.
recent movies, or people that love the recent movies. I mean, the fan world is so fickle and opinionated, and it's like Batman or Buffy or Star Wars or any of that stuff. Everybody has their own opinion about what
Yes.
that property should be.
Yes.
And you know,
And they're very vocal
and
about it.
yeah, they are. So I'm just going to wait and see. That's what we can do. I'm hoping for the best,
Yep.
and let's see what they do.
All right. That's cool.
They wanted the property so bad. Step up to the plate. Let's see what you got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the best attitude you can have.
Yep.
All right. So if listeners want to jump on the Felix Leiter, the hook in the eye bandwagon right now, what can they do? You said they can go to Amazon and sign up, or
Well, yeah. If you're in America, the best place to do it. I mean, it depends on what kind of reading device you have. It would be for Kindle. It would be Amazon. For a Nook, it would be Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
And I guess there are other devices wherever you go. Like Apple or whatever, whatever that device is. Or your own phone or your computer. I don't know what you use, to read ebooks, but that's where you go. And you buy it. I mean, you can pre-order it now.
Okay.
Good. That's what we want to know. Okay, good.
Yeah.
And will there be an
and then-
audiobook? Do you have an audiobook scheduled for it?
There's possibly, yes. I mean, we don't have one in the works yet, but I would bet that there will be.
Okay.
And then you can pre-order the paperback from ianfleming.com.
Okay. There you go. That's good. And if people want more information about all of your books, Raymond, where should they go? RaymondBenson.com?
RaymondBenson.com. Yeah.
All right, folks.
I should say that those of you in the UK can order the ebook and the paperback directly from ianfleming.com.
Okay. That's good to know.
And RaymondBenson.com, the last word BENSON.com.
Yes, BENSON.
All right.
Yeah. Right. There you go. All right. Well, thank you, Raymond. We're excited to hear this great news of you writing a Felix Leiter novel, The Hook and the Eye. So everybody, go order it now.
Absolutely.
So fun talking with you, Raymond. Fantastic.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right. That's a wrap. This has been Dan
And Tom.
of SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Subscribe to our show right now and tell a friend about us, too. We appreciate you spending time with us. Thanks.